Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to this session. We are so excited to have you here today, and I have a amazing set of speakers to share with you today. My name is Ellen Steiner, and I'm from Opinion Dynamics, am part of the program committee, and really enjoyed putting this particular session together. So we're going to have four conversations today. The first one, Cynthia Gage is going to be leading up, talking about understanding perceptions and building support for beneficial electrification. Jen Loomis will follow that talking about electrifying affordable housing. Then following that, Kristen is going to talk through a case study from a systems perspective of transitioning to air source heat pumps. And then finally, Rosa is really going to end our session really talking a little more broader about how to make sure we're providing access to electricity and internet to all our population within the country, and specifically looking at the Navajo Nation. So a pretty exciting group of speakers today. You will see that we put a poll up in the chat. And this one is, how important do you think building electrification is to our future? This is just kind of an icebreaker question, but would love for individuals to go ahead and put ABC down, and we'll kind of monitor that throughout the session. We will also be doing some polling questions, and those polling questions will happen kind of in blocks, so would love for your opportunity to participate in those as they pop up, usually when. So with that said, we'll go ahead and kick off our session today. Again, as I mentioned, our first speaker is Cindy Gage. She has been supporting Energy Star with strategic marketing services as well as other clean energy clients for the last 20 plus years. Coming from CNC. For the last 1.5 years, she's been focused on exploring consumer attitudes and behaviors with regard to energy efficiency. In recent months, she's completed several research studies to assess customer knowledge, understanding, and receptivity towards beneficial. She's going to share that research with us today and kind of do a top-line summary of her learnings. Go ahead and take it away. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm going to just take a second to pull up my presentation for you. There we go. Thanks so much. Really a pleasure to be here today. It's such an exciting time in the world of energy and an exciting time to be thinking about what's coming next. And I'm pleased to be able to share the results of this research study that we completed on behalf of EPA's Energy Star program, and just shared with the team actually in the last month. So we undertook this research for Energy Star with the goal of trying to understand how consumers perceive the concept of electrification. Obviously, in order to engage people in this mission, they need to understand what we're talking about. And the term electrification, beneficial electrification, or decarbonization, it's all for those of us outside, or those outside the energy world, a little confusing. So we wanted to understand the best way to message that, what some of the key barriers and motivators would be to getting people engaged in electrification, and finding ways that we can use all of that learning to inform outreach on behalf of Energy Star, as well as others. So let's get started, and I'll share with you some of the things that we learned. Firstly, let me just talk about our target audience. So we did an online qualitative study. We had 7 groups of consumers who fit 2 broad categories. One that we called the unengaged, and that was composed of people who we term energy savers and energy intenders. So people who are actively engaged in different conservation behaviors, energy efficiency behaviors, and those who are interested and about to take action. For example, a renter who's about to become a homeowner. We looked at that engaged audience to be at least half of them decision makers on household purchases, somewhat familiar with Energy Star, an appropriate mix of gender, urban, rural, suburban, education, and ethnicity. in order to represent the population. Our unengaged audiences, in contrast, were folks who were homeowners, but were not at all actively engaged in saving energy, that they don't consider energy efficiency when they're looking to purchase a product, that they're not necessarily, or don't think they are necessarily using products that are designed for energy efficiency, like EVs or heat pump water heaters, that they don't have any % of their energy coming from renewables, and that they were only somewhat or not at all familiar with Energy Star. And in this way, we were looking to segment our audiences to understand if folks who were already engaged in energy efficiency and had the right mentality about wanting to learn more about decarbonization, how might their attitudes and behavior differ from those who were not all engaged? Because this is an all-in proposition, folks. If we're going to change the world, we need everybody getting on board. So our first finding was that overall, the reaction to the concept of electrification was really positive. We came up with this description, and we called electrification Idea E, and referred to it as Idea E, so that we wouldn't cause any confusion or predilection regarding our terminology. And the description, as you can read, Idea E involves using electricity generated from clean renewable sources, such as wind or solar, instead of fossil fuels, which pollute the air and contribute to climate change. Idea E promotes the use of electricity for all new development and switching fuel sources where fossil fuels are currently used. And this means that under Idea E, buildings, homes, and vehicles, anything requiring power, would be powered with clean electricity rather than fossil fuels and renewable energy sources, which currently supply most of the electricity in the United States. Importantly, we added this message that the transition has begun in communities across the country and will gradually change the way electricity is generated, managed, and provided to all customers. So among engaged and unengaged audiences, the reaction to this description was really positive and very similar. 79% for engaged, 77% for unengaged liked this description. The unengaged had a slightly higher number of those who didn't love the description. And, I'm sorry. And what you see on the left in terms of the description are the particular concepts that were reacted to negatively or positively. So everything in blue were terms that our target audiences found very positive about the concept of electrification. Generation from clean renewable sources, wind and solar, getting rid of fossil fuels, using clean electricity for all development, switching fuel. These were all positively regarded concepts. Negative reactions were, interestingly, really positive reactions to electrification. The negative reactions were things like people not liking the term pollution, people not liking the term climate change because they wanted to see efforts taken to change impact to climate. And fossil fuels, of course, again, was another negatively reacted term. Let's see if we can get, okay. We also talked about different naming conventions with our target audiences. And the ones that connoted a clean energy transition were the most appealing. Things like clean energy transformation, that was number one, and clean electric switch. People could easily get their heads around what that meant. They liked the idea of a gradual transformation. They liked the idea of positive change. And then you can see where other terms were less preferred. And those sort of industry-oriented terms like strategic electrification, decarbonization, beneficial electrification, even efficient electrification came down at the end of the ranking. And that was really because they didn't resonate with people. They didn't mean something to the average person. The average person understands clean, they understand energy, and they understand transformation. So that was really where we were having the best results. Oops. We also talked with our respondents about what were the most motivating factors to learn more? Oh, sorry, my screen keeps jumping. And what was very interesting here that we found was personal impact, not just on your home, but also on the environment, were the strongest motivators for folks to learn more. So we gave folks a list of motivators and asked them to rank them. And the number one ranked was finding out what electrification means for your home now and in the future. Number two was finding out how Idea E affects how you use energy in your home. And I think it's really interesting that these two were ranked separately. What we found from the comments was that number one, finding what it means for your home now and in the future, sort of captured people's ideals and aspirations about a clean energy transition. They really wanted to get the big picture. Secondly, of course, was that personal impact about what does it mean for my home, my energy use. Finding out about your personal impact on things like air pollution and climate change was also really resonant with people. And then you can see where some of the concepts, as they became a little less personal, became less motivating. Finding out how Ideas E safeguards the environment from climate change, finding out how you can participate, finding out how it contributes to the community, creating jobs for the future. It seemed that the more we got away from personal impact, the less interest we were having from our audiences. Now, when we looked at those results from the engaged versus the non-engaged, we found that personal impact was a little bit more important to those unengaged audiences. So when we looked at those motivators, we found that among engaged and unengaged, they were very closely matched when we talked about what it means for your home now and in the future. But the more we moved down to other aspects that were less personally relevant, the more we started to lose the unengaged. So what this says to us is that it's really important when we're talking about decarbonization, strategic electrification, whatever term we're using, if we want to engage people, we have to be really personally relevant in our messaging. Another factor that we uncovered was that we really needed more education. People are curious and they've got questions, they've got concerns, and they're not necessarily negative. It's just that this is a very new concept and people need to be brought along. We can't just throw concepts out there. We need to bring them along and help them become more comfortable by answering these questions proactively. How does this transition occur? This was a big question across all audiences. What's the impact to infrastructure? What does it cost? Who pays for it? What's the timeline? How fast is this going to happen? And then from a particular perspective of personal impact, what kind of equipment do I need? What can be powered with renewable energy? What kind of changes need to happen to my home infrastructure? Including the implications of fuel switching. And while all of these audiences had the big picture questions, certain segments were more concerned about different things. So segment E, which was one portion of our engaged customers, they were really interested. They're more engaged, they are active energy savers, and they are advocates for saving energy. So their questions went right to what specific equipment can I use? Interesting, the unengaged were focused on the same exact thing. What specific equipment do I need? So while folks weren't engaged, they weren't disinterested. They really wanted to learn more. Changes to home infrastructure was also among folks that were unengaged, as well as those who are engaged in energy saving and care about the environment. People were also really interested in understanding what the progress and results were from markets that were already taking action with regard to the clean energy transition. They wanted to kind of get that case study perspective. So taking away from that, the more we can share results as we go through these transitions, the more effective our communications will be with target audiences. And then lastly, people were interested in why the transition is important. Again, it gets to understanding impact on the environment, impact on personal energy use and in the environment. Why is this important to us at all? Now, we also looked at our target audiences and tried to understand what the benefits were that were most important related to electrification. And across all of the audiences, we did find some consistency. And we took all of these benefits and we characterized them into 3 categories. One, which is in red, those personal impacts. What does it mean for me? What does it mean for my home? The second, what you see in blue text, are environmental benefits. It's better for the environment. It helps fight climate change. And then the last group we characterized as economic. So supporting economic development, creating jobs, even freedom from oil and energy independence, we put in that bucket. And as you can see, the personal impact of a healthier, safer fuel source for your home was across the board the most important benefit. It had the least detractors. And as we went down the list, we had a big chunk that were really interested in the environmental benefits, whether they were engaged and unengaged. Now, when we looked at those benefits into 2 separate categories of engaged and unengaged, we saw a little bit of a shift. The engaged were a little more interested in the environmental impact, while the unengaged were a little more interested in the personal impact. So that's an important balance to strike when we're looking to formulate messaging to engage people in decarbonization efforts. Now, we also looked
Cindy,
at—
we are at time, so if you could wrap it up, that would be
okay,
great.
wrapping up really quickly. We looked at the role of Energy Star, what Energy Star should play in electrification. And because that audiences understand what Energy Star is, they understand the mission orientation of Energy Star, and they see a natural synergy between Energy Star's mission and the role of and the move towards electrification, and will look to Energy Star as a key resource to help them make those choices. And that's based on Energy Star's mission, as I said, and energy expertise. So in summary, broad receptivity and support for electrification. There's a lot of interest in learning more. Consumer messaging needs to be clear and free of jargon and in consumer terms, not industry terms. And we have a great opportunity to build emotional connection with that aspirational messaging of environmental impact. And education will be key. We need to proactively answer those questions that consumers have about electrification. And lastly, we found that Energy Star can be a really strong, trusted resource for helping customers feel confident and supported in the move to clean energy. Boom, done. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you so much, Cindy. We'll have a breakout session to ask questions about this really interesting study. I know I was.
Ellen, you got muted.
That happened. Okay, love technology. So next we're going to put up a polling question. So if you could please just take a quick answer as part of the clean energy transition, how important do you think it is to electrify affordable? While that poll is going on, our next speaker will be Dr. Jen Loomis. She is a social scientist with a background in environmental sociology, social inequality, and qualitative research. She is a principal consultant at Opinion Dynamics. Her current research is focused on building decarbonization and expanding the role of heat pumps. This work has led her to hold conversations with hundreds of market actors across the country. And her research spans building types as well as uncovers the varied dynamics in the residential sector between single-family homes, multifamily housing, and affordable housing. So I'll let Jen take it away. Jen, please.
All right, thank you, Ellen.
And publish the poll, that would be great as well.
Okay, sure. I think I can do that. Okay, so it looks like most of you think that it is important, very or extremely, to electrify affordable housing. So that's really exciting, and I'll tell you how we can make that possible. So I will start my presentation and share that for you. Okay. All right, so yeah, I'll be sharing insights from new construction professionals on the role of heat pumps. So right now there is growing interest in building electrification and decarbonization. In fact, more than 50 cities in California alone have banned natural gas in new construction. But we know there's lots of benefits from avoiding natural gas. There's environmental benefits and health and safety benefits too. Yet there are some barriers in the affordable housing sector. Rents are capped, which limits the amount that a developer can earn back over the lifetime of a building. And so they're motivated to keep their construction costs low. And that means relying on equipment they're familiar with, like natural gas equipment, or if that's banned, going with the code minimum electric equipment because it's the cheapest. But and then the highly efficient electric equipment, though, like heat pumps, can be a little more expensive. But I'm going to share with you what we've learned about ways developers are making it happen and installing efficient heat pumps in affordable housing buildings. So I'll start by covering some of the benefits of avoiding natural gas. There are significant time, material, and cost savings. If you need to trench a new line from the street to your building, that can cost anywhere between $10,000 and $20,000. And then if you've got to pipe that from that line to every single unit in a multifamily building and then vent it out of there, that's a lot of materials and labor, which translates into money. So you can save a lot there just by avoiding the natural gas infrastructure. Also, anytime you need to coordinate with a utility to get service to your site, that can involve delays. And so in areas where the gas provider differs from the electric provider, you can have an advantage to your project by only working with one utility company. And then also, once the building is built, operations and maintenance teams don't need the gas safety equipment or tools. So the property owner doesn't need to buy those, replace those, or train their staff on how to use them. Also, the tenant can avoid a fixed delivery charge if they're only paying one utility bill instead of two. This delivery charge is a fixed fee that comes on your bill every month, regardless of how much energy you use. And then also tenants with electric appliances, if they're on a time of use rate, they can take advantage of that and use their electric appliances during the off-peak hours where the rates are lowest. There's also health, comfort, and safety benefits to avoiding natural gas in new construction. Gas-fired equipment can off-gas fumes like methane and carbon monoxide. And so, not having that in the house means improved indoor air quality. And we know that low-income communities tend to have a disproportionate burden of respiratory illnesses. And so if we can just avoid this in their home altogether, that's a huge safety benefit. And also they don't need carbon monoxide detectors either. There's less risk of fire and explosion in case of an earthquake in particular. And then also heat pumps can provide air conditioning. Typically in affordable housing in most states, air conditioning is not provided. And if a low-income tenant's not used to having it and all of a sudden starts using it all the time, that could lead to increased energy bills. So it is important to do tenant education at the same time. But with the growing number of heat waves and really hot days that we've had, having the heat pump would at least give them the option to cool their home a little bit and make it a little more comfortable on days with high temperatures. Okay, so now that I've explained some of the benefits of avoiding natural gas, let's look at some of the funding sources that enable a developer to make this happen. The first one I want to tell you about is the low-income housing tax credits. And these are used on a majority of affordable housing projects, easily 90% of them. And this is a federal program that was founded in 1986. And the federal government issues these tax credits to the states, and then the states issue them to housing authorities or developers. And in exchange for the tax credits, the property owner agrees that a portion of the units will be available to residents at a discounted price for residents with incomes less than 60% of the area median income. And they promise to offer these fixed price units. It's usually for 30 years, but the minimum is 15 years. And importantly, these tax credits are used together with the utility allowance calculator. And what we found in our research is that this utility allowance calculator really is a game changer that allows the developers to justify choosing the more expensive but highly energy efficient equipment. So what this calculator does is it estimates a tenant's utility bills based on the building characteristics and location. And then those utility bills are included in the fixed rent that a landlord can charge. Now, if the tenant's actual utility bills are below what that calculator estimated, then the landlord still collects that fixed rent, but they have less money they have to pass on to the utilities. And so they can effectively pocket the difference, which translates basically into more rent that they're keeping. And so we found that the tax credits paired with the utility calculator was a really strong motivator for developers to exceed the energy code and invest in the highly efficient heat pumps. And so this allows their project to pencil out over the long term. I also want to share with you some incentive programs that increase the value proposition for heat pumps. So when you pair a heat pump with these types of programs, it makes a lot of financial sense for the developer. So if a program incentivizes a property to install solar PV, it makes a strong case to switch the water heating to an electric heat pump water heater. Water heating is the biggest energy user in a multifamily building, accounting for about 1/3 of the energy use. So if you had an efficient heat pump water heater, you can take advantage of the sun's energy to heat the water and reduce your energy costs and the tenant utility bills. Also, programs that require some of the energy to be sourced from on-site renewables also make a strong case for a heat pump water heater, because the solar PV footprint is smaller than that of gas-fired water heating systems. And it can be a real challenge for developers to site enough PV on a roof, particularly in dense urban environments. So if your efficient equipment means you need a smaller PV footprint, then that also saves in costs and makes it all easier for the project. And then finally, incentive programs that offer incentives for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. If you're able to install a heat pump instead of the code minimum equipment, that's a great way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and earn incentives through a program like this. I just want to quickly review a little bit of other funding and financing that we've heard developers using to design highly efficient electric affordable housing. There's other funding available from the federal government, from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and community development block grants have been an important source for affordable housing too. Local governments also will offer funding, and their funding is almost always prioritized for projects that are offering affordable housing or exceed the energy code. And then last, there's a good number of utilities that offer on-bill financing. And this is usually at 0% interest or really low interest rates, like 1 or 2%. And so what happens here is the developer will actually pay back the loan on their utility bill out of the energy savings they've achieved by doing an energy efficiency project. Okay, and so I'll just quickly wrap it up now for you. So I want you to know that electrification of affordable housing is possible, and it is happening today. There are cities mandating it, and design and construction teams are figuring out how to comply. developers are patching together funding and tax credits and incentives to justify their investment in higher efficiency equipment. And at the same time, they're saving a lot of money and time by avoiding natural gas. And we're avoiding greenhouse gas emissions if we're not doing natural gas and we're able to take advantage of the renewable electricity on the grid. And at the same time, we're also creating a safer and healthier home for some of our community's most vulnerable residents. And there's my contact information. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jen. That was great. Again, you'll have an opportunity to ask Jen questions in the breakout sessions following our session today. We're going to do another quick poll. This one's pretty easy. Do you have an air source heat pump in your home? While we're doing that poll, Kristen Osterwood will be leading up the next part of our session. She has been working in green buildings and electric utilities since 2008. She has delved deep into what a sustainable built environment means, both from LEED to well to passive homes. And she is currently pursuing a PhD in systems engineering with a research focus on decarbonization of heating in the Northeast through electrification, while also working full-time to embed sustainability at local electric and gas utilities. So Kristen, very impressive. I'm very excited to hear your presentation. Go ahead and end the poll and put those results up. Okay.
Are they shared? Can everyone see them? But it looks like, all right. So it looks like most people would like to, but they currently don't. So, and there are a few that have no interest. So, okay. There we go. Okay, everyone see my screen? We're good. So yeah, I am a dual. I'm working full time at the utility, trying to embed sustainability into all of the operations there, and I am working on a PhD program at Worcester Polytechnic, where my focus is decarbonization of heating in the Northeast. So very applicable to everything at this conference. There we go. So just an overview. First, I'm going to go into the barriers of installing air source heat pumps and transitioning to those, the installation practices and perceptions, and then the performance of an actual air source heat pump using a case study, and the conclusions of what we should be doing to move forward. So the case study, it's a residence in New Hampshire. It's a typical home in New England, built in 1910, has many random additions throughout the years. It's 3,000 square feet. Based on energy use, it qualified for the Energy Utility Energy Efficiency Program. The total energy use was 59 kBTU per square foot per year before any improvements were done. And just to put it in perspective, for those of you who don't speak kBTU per square foot per year, passive house, most energy efficient building standard there is 4.75 kBTU per square foot per year. So not a passive house, to say the least. The heating was a gas boiler with hot water baseboard and also gas used for hot water and the stove. So the heat pump installers, traditional installation. In the Northeast, air source heat pumps have been used to improve comfort in rooms for many years. And normally when you install an air source heat pump in a room for comfort, it's not because your house is well insulated. It's normally because it's kind of leaky. So it's led to this perception that mini splits are only heat and cool the room where there is a head, and the perception that air source heat pumps only complement existing heating systems and not a standalone heating system, as it's normally it's traditionally been installed in rather leaky houses, that it hasn't been really cost effective to do air source heat pumps. And lastly, the heating load is calculated based upon the square footage, not the historical energy use or the insulation of the home. And as we're getting more and more energy efficient homes, just using the square footage, there's really, you know, poor performing buildings and there's really high performing buildings, and that needs to be reflected in the heating load calculation. So these are quotes from heat pump installers. The first A through D are all for air source heat pumps, and then the last two are for geothermal. And those are just to give a perspective, and they don't include, none of these include the rebates. There's the federal rebate for geothermal that would bring it down by around 15,000. putting it closer to air source heat pumps, but still significantly more. As you can see, all of the installers recommended the Mitsubishi Hyperheat air source heat pump, but then there was quite a bit of variation between what they recommended. 1 unit outside, 2 units outside, 3 units inside with a branch box. Some recommended a ducted system for upstairs bedrooms. There was some variation. The system that was installed was installer D for 16,000. But a little caveat on that, all the quotes are quite biased because they're all scaled back from what the installer would have provided without the homeowner input. Because it was, you need a head in every room. That is how we install it. We don't want anyone calling for complaints. We like to ensure comfort. You need a head in every room. And along that, all installers recommended having a backup heat source. One even noted that right on the quote, like, we recommend having a backup heat source. Interestingly, the installer that had that on the quote doesn't have a backup heat source in their own home. They use air source heat pumps only, but they don't have that. They recommend it. So the transition from gas to electric, this was done in the summer of 2020. So we're comparing the winter of 2019, 2020, and then 2020 to 2021 winters. So the old system was a gas boiler with gas and direct hot water and a gas cooktop. The new system, air source heat pump water heater, and induction cooktop. So this is the performance comparison of the energy use normalized to heating degree days between the two winters. You can see that the energy use of the air source heat pump is less than half of what the gas was. And it's not just heating, of course, because as we were talking about how energy efficient heat pump water heaters are, this is also reflected in this data. And then the cost also normalized to heating degree days. There are 3 or 4 months where the heat pump does cost more than the gas did, but on the shoulder seasons, the heat pump blows the gas out of the water. And this is just for the heating season. It doesn't have, I didn't show the whole year on this because I just wanted to show the heating degree normalized month. So when considering the whole year for heating degree normalized, comparing the total building energy use, it's less than half of what it used to be using an air source heat pump. The heating only comparison between gas and air source heat pump, the energy use is 1/4 what it used to be, and the total cost is about the same. When Jen was mentioning the fixed delivery fee for gas, it's pretty much the difference between the cost of the 2 years. Excuse me. So they're relatively comparable, which is not the perception. But I do want to add there are a few caveats to this. So prior to either of these years' data, so back in 2019, there was insulation added, so it no longer qualified for the utility energy efficiency program. It got all the low-hanging fruit, reduced energy consumption by about 20%. Additionally, the residence has a whole house energy recovery ventilation system, which does help transfer the heating and cooling around the building. It circulates it through the building, which when we're looking at how air source heat pumps have traditionally been installed for, a small area or small room and not expecting to heat a whole house, that is when you had old leaky houses. When you have energy efficient houses that need ventilation to ensure indoor air quality, those two units can work together, the ventilation and the air source heat pump. So you don't need a head in every room because you have the ventilation system circulating the air anyway. And just to go over again the changes between the summer that were implemented in the summer of 2020, the gas boiler, water heater, and cooktop were replaced with air source heat pump water heater, and induction cooktop. And then a few caveats about the difference in operation between the 2 years. When it was on gas, there were daily setbacks down to 60 degrees, either on the different floors of the house, depending on what was occupied, and only 2/3 of the home was heated because of really poor insulation and air sealing on 1/3 of the home. When it was operated with an air source heat pump, it was set it and forget it because setbacks don't work well with air source heat pump, so 24 hours a day it was at the same temperature. The whole house was heated because additional insulation was added almost exclusively to that section of the house that was very poorly insulated previously. And so it seems like those different ways that the house was operated and the insulation and percentage of the home was heated seem to have balanced each other out. Another thing to note, of course, this is the year of COVID, so there's a lot more people in the house than there were the year before. So there's more body heat, but there's more people using electronics and working from home. So just conclusions and practices about perceptions and how to move forward from this. Air source heat pumps, they face significant barriers of perception and installation practices. And what's the most energy efficient and sustainable option? One of the my presentations for my PhD program, I keep going back to this is the, the carbon per the CO2 per grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, or for kBTU for different sources of heating, and going through that, like, gas is not the preferred option anymore. Using an air source heat pump actually results in about 1/4 of the CO2 emissions per unit of energy. So there's perceptions. There's a lot of perceptions to overcome because we've been told for so many years that gas is the solution. So we need to go back on that and be like, gas is no longer the solution. And these are not your heat pumps of 30 years ago. These are much more efficient. And that is why the greening of the grid and the energy efficiency of the pumps. So there's perceptions that we need to get over on that. So doing research and educational on campaigns on not only the performance and that it does perform in New England completely effectively, and also the greenhouse gas emissions, and be like, this is why we're electrifying, because it's still not clear to so many people. And then overcoming the hurdles of installers and what they have previously done, and transitioning to more energy efficient buildings, and using the energy efficient buildings to size the air source heat pump instead of just using the square footage, and transitioning it to a whole house heating system and not just a room by room heating system. So thank you.
Got to unmute myself. Thank you so much, Kristen. That was great. Again, you'll have an opportunity to ask Kristen some. So we're coming up to our final poll of today. So we'll go ahead and post that. And this one is, should the internet be made widely accessible to the general population like other utilities like water? Go ahead and respond to that, Richard. Our final speaker today is Rosa Mitsumasu Scotti. She has a Master of Science in Sustainable Systems with a focus on climate change adaptation. Through her work, she's looked at systems and stakeholder engagement to provide concrete, sustainable, vulnerable populations facing hardship. She was born and raised in Lima, Peru, and currently resides in San Diego, California, where she works in.
Hi, everybody.
So it looks like hello. Let's go ahead and end this poll, and we'll go ahead quickly and share the results. And Rosa, I'll let you take it.
Okay, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I'm having some issues with my tech, but I should have just gonna start sharing my screen. Just give me 1 second, please. So yeah, while I get this going, I just wanted to share that I'm gonna be talking a little bit about inclusive opportunities to create inclusive energy solutions for communities that are underserved. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about the Navajo Nation. Can you see my screen yet or no?
Not yet.
Okay, just give me 1 second, please. Anyway, I'll just get started while this is sorting out. Why? I guess the question you may think, why did I decide to talk about the Navajo Nation, right? And the reason why is because, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, this is not ideal, but let's see what I can do here. Well, the Navajo Nation, in the last 2 years, COVID-19 showed that the Navajo Nation was particularly, tribal communities in general were highly vulnerable to COVID-19, right? We saw that, can you see my graphs now coming up?
Can
Yes, we can see.
see
Okay.
part of your graph.
Okay, so I just wanted to show the first graph that it just shows how indigenous communities in the United States were suffering significant higher deaths than other groups, as you can see. And this was between the end of 2020 and early 2021. And then we also saw other reports about the Navajo Nation, how many of them were dying at significantly higher rates than other places such as New York, New Jersey, that we were seeing in the news, a lot more than tribal communities, but it just revealed that these communities have, a lot of vulnerabilities. So I don't know who is in the room with us today, but maybe you don't know much about the Navajo Nation. It's the largest Native American reservation in the United States. It has, you can see the map right there. It takes part of Utah, a large portion of Arizona and New Mexico in the southwestern the United States. And this population is spread out throughout this territory. Some of them live outside of the reservation, but many of them are just spread out, right? So that's one thing we know about them. The other thing we know is that 10% of the households don't have access to electricity, and 38% of the population is currently living in poverty. So when looking at all of these challenges and all of these constraints for the population, it was about setting a problem statement that was like, how do we bring electricity to this highly dispersed population with high rates of poverty, and with high levels of lack of access to electricity. And as you know, having access to electricity gives us access to a cooking stove. It gives us access to light to be able to just see, do our chores. Now, it's so important for us to be able to access the internet, right? Where a lot of us are doing our work through the internet, but maybe it's just as simple as being able to access information, especially when it comes to the pandemic, which is very much still part of our reality today. So this is sort of like the main factors that I was looking at when thinking about this complex population that has so many challenges. And the part of this concept of this paper is to look at a systems perspective and generate an inclusive solution that not only addresses electrification from clean energy, because first of all, the southwest of the United States is an area that just receives a lot of solar radiation. So there is a lot of opportunity to work with modular solar systems. But how do we make this happen? And also, while taking in consideration poverty. So it's about basically setting the problem in a way that we can address several challenges. So knowing that many of them, so 10% of the households don't have electricity, that we know, right? That's part of the demographic data that I found from the Navajo Nation. This is another one, like I said, highly dispersed. So there's an opportunity to provide solar photovoltaic and energy storage. And also because there are so many households, the Pareto law that gives us the 80 and 20. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Pareto law that says that 20% 80% of the impact that we can have comes from 20% of the solution. So given this, just how dispersed the population is, this proposal aims to give, instead of putting solar panels in each household, which would be very costly, it's an idea to do 20% of those of that access to electricity directly in the household, and the rest of the 80% of the rest of the population would be able to go to an electric hub. Like, think of it as a library, a place where people can go and charge their electronics, or perhaps have access to the internet. So because these are hubs that would have self-contained access to solar and also storage, it gives the opportunity to provide internet, so to provide Wi-Fi. So there's a double tier service access there in the electric hubs, right? There are 3 goals. So we have the goal of providing electricity, provided in a way that adapts to the low population density, and then while trying to tackle the problem of poverty, which is so high in this population, would be to bring stakeholders from the supply chain, because we would have vendors that sell the equipment and vendors that install the equipment, but they could also participate in some sort of mentorship or training opportunities, so that the people that live in this community in the Navajo Nation, all the different communities, can participate. So it would be, sort of like engaging with the locals in this new green economy. So this is sort of like a systems approach to a problem that is not just electricity access, that is not just modular solar access, but it's also the inclusion of the people there in job creation, in training, in mentorships, and also the leadership of the community to make decisions. So this third component of this systems approach would be working closely with the supply chain partners. So that means that you have to create a criteria for the procurement of these vendors. Who's working with you is not only who can give me the lower cost on a solar PV, but would this organization be willing to participate in a training program? Would this organization be able to take in a few folks for apprenticeships, for mentorships, something that a program that could create a funnel for Native Americans to participate in this project that is taking place in their land. And the way to create this is to create a set of vendor incentives, right? What types of incentives? There's this, there's purchasing groups, there's different types of association, there is publicity, there is different types of incentives that can be created to, to recruit supply chain partners to participate. So as we're looking at this issue, as we're looking about inclusivity and creating a comprehensive plan for electrification, we're looking at the importance of stakeholders and how they come together to bring the vision, not only the vision, but also very specific goals and roles. Obviously, we talked a little bit about the supply chain, the investors, the funders. There's different opportunities for philanthropy. There's opportunity for state, the federal grants, state grants, and then obviously we would need the Navajo Nation leadership to have their buy-in, right? Because this is all happening for the Navajo people and it's happening in their land. So the project scope, just to repeat, the first component would be the solar photovoltaic system. just the heart of the equipment, the infrastructure cost of the e-hubs, the installation cost, and then of those solar panels on site for the households and at the e-hubs. We have the costs for satellite Wi-Fi, so people can, when they go to the hubs, to have access to charge their devices. They can also browse the internet, learn more about what's happening with vaccinations, perhaps download some information. Kids may be able to register for classes, access to online job opportunities. There's just so much. The internet has shortened distances for us, so this is a very important component. Being able to have an infrastructure, and the way I think about it is how libraries play a role right now. For instance, if your hometown or your district has a library, that's a hub for people to go in there, to find jobs, to just, elderly, to have a place to be with children for entertainment. It becomes really a community center. And then we also would have another important component of this project is a community foundation, which is the place where philanthropy can be processed, can be engaged, where the project is managed. So there's project management, because this is a project that would take a total of 10 years from the creation of a working group of the stakeholders that I mentioned, the management and the implementation of the project, and the incentives for the training program. So this would be sort of the components there. This is just—
Rosa, you've got about 2 minutes left.
Okay, and these are just a chart showing the data and the calculations, the formula that was used with future value, and it would lead to a total investment of approximately $23 million. It's like a capital campaign, and this is how the funding model. This is a highly simplified version of the funding model. And this is how this chart shows how the implementation would go throughout the years. Orange is electricity, solar access, and Wi-Fi access would be in this number of households per year. So as you see, the way this model is created, it would be bringing electricity to people in 10 years, to those 10% households that are, not connected to the grid right now. And the impact is, of course, not just having infrastructure, but giving people the opportunity to have access to services, to go to school, to eat a homemade meal, and to participate in a green local economy, which is an opportunity for job creation. It's just local development in general. And that's it. That's what I have. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you so much, Rosa. That was really, really interesting. So you've heard 4 talks talking about electrification, talking specifically about heat pumps, and talking about larger issues in terms of getting just electricity to folks, as well as internet and other services. So this has been really, really interesting.